now I'm kind of next to this TED talk of yours somewhat in
Yeah.
my thoughts, because I was really impressed with this presentation of yours
Yeah.
where you talked about how XR can help with grassroots initiatives, right? And how they can make this initiative more compelling to people to relate to, etc. Maybe you can talk more about this, just a brief overview of that. And then hypothetically, your kind of thought about XR and grassroots initiatives and haptics, adding haptics. If we add haptics into this experience, can it help and how again?
I think the world has increasingly been flattening for 100 years, right? It was first it was Pony Express, then it was telegraph, then it was telephone, right? And we've increasingly been able to connect with people immediately. I think VR and AR and VR are the next generation of that spatial computing, where we actually, like I said, have a sense of body. We can be with somebody in 3D. So the next generation of that is being able to actually interact with them more naturally, which includes touch. So for the TED Talk, I talked about the flattening of the world and how, you might care deeply about something and somebody else might care deeply about that, but they're on the other side of the planet. And with VR, you can actually find your tribe even more so than social media has done. Back when we were doing the internet stuff in the early days, we used to talk about somebody who made coats for goats, right? You are the only person who makes coats for goats, but all of a sudden you find out through the internet and that there are other people, and then all of a sudden you have a group, and there's positive and negatives, as we've seen with that. But with VR, you actually have that sense of presence and that sense of community, and you can have a virtual community and connect people from all over the globe around things that you care about, right? So grassroots movements about planting trees, grassroots movements around political things. You can join, in theory, not yet live streaming VR, but we're getting there. You can join that protest that's happening in China or wherever. But again, I think those are pale experiences if you can't actually hold up that banner and feel the wind, or if you can't feel the group when you're in a group, how that feels like to stand with a bunch of people.
Like immersion, right?
Right. So I think that's what the grassroots movements aspect of it is you'll be able to connect on a much more deeper level than you can through social media and words. And especially with the instant translation that's now out, which has been coming for ages too, been waiting for that one forever, where you can just talk and language is no longer a barrier. And all of a sudden you can talk to people from different countries and find out that they are doing they care deeply about deforestation. You care deeply about deforestation. There's deforestation in Brazil. There's deforestation here. And all of a sudden you've got a group of people and you can meet with them. So I think that it'll fuel grassroots movements because it'll cause that connection to come much more quickly and much more intensely than we have now. Now it's a Facebook group and we got keyboard warriors who piss you off and they leave the group. It's an opportunity to connect and create a virtual community that is actually only really virtual technically, because it feels like the real thing when you're in it. And the haptics part is being able to feel, I think, more part of that, again, that sense of touch, that sense of I could plant a virtual tree, I can feel that thing growing, I can feel the earth, I can whatever your grassroots movement is, you can interact with people in a much more natural manner and find
Right.
people who are like-minded.
It's actually, for me, it was super interesting to kind of think about this use case of grassroots and kind of maybe somewhat social rights issues that we can bring closer to people. Because essentially it's about building empathy, right? So we want to have more people on board. And how do we do that? Yes, we can show compelling pictures, right? Some emotional images. We can make them listen to stuff, right?
It's very mental. It's very mental.
All these are very important things, right?
It's very mental though, but you can't experience it. So Greenpeace actually has a boat and they are doing VRX. This is not, they've done this for like 2-3 years now, but they have a boat that they send to the Antarctic and you're on the boat, you see the melting ice, you're part of that boat. You're going with them, literally going with them, right? I mean, I used a bunch of, Greenpeace was in there in that example. There's a couple others that I used. But I think it's an enormously powerful tool to be able to tell your story as a not even just
in these particular cases, right?
Yeah, not even a nonprofit necessarily. It's as a human who cares about something, you can communicate that in ways verbal is only one tiny part of our communication. There's so many other ways that we communicate with nonverbal cues, all kinds of things. So I think that VR helps bring that along, so it tells a 360 story
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. I totally agree, because if I'm talking just about, because I'm in haptics, so I'm kind of like biased always haptics, and it's always kind of like difficult to bring very compelling new use cases for haptics, right? Yes, VR space and fine, but what for, right? And the main kind of use case is gaming.
Always.
For me personally, it's boring. I mean, it's too commercial to kind of boring in
Yeah.
a way. And even though it's a big industry, obviously.
I'm not a gamer, believe it or not. I never game ever, but
Uh-huh.
and I don't
Me
need
neither. Even though I
I
think I
don't
should be from
yeah,
the experimental point of view.
exactly. And I don't need to feel shot. That's okay. Or kicked or any of that stuff. But I do love the idea for a doctor not only to do, practice on VR surgery and practice on operating on that tiny little heart, but actually feel what it's like to do it so that the practice and the training feels real, right? There's, commercial enterprise applications for all these things. Everybody immediately goes to games and consumer, but in fact, the enterprise is where a lot of the focus is right now, the money, training, education, empathy, soft skills training, hard skills training, right? And all of those can be much enhanced if you can actually feel what you're doing.
Right. Yeah, this is a really amazing case, which is super compelling, and haptics are like could be really part of it. Because in a nutshell, yes, it's a sense of presence, like overarching kind of objective, but then sense of presence for what makes a huge difference, right? Because you will approach the design aspects or design space of this technology in a very specific way. If your use case is social cause versus gaming, for instance, right?
Yeah.
So find it super interesting. It's a bad word for this case, but it's really worth exploring further, I would say, from research or any other angle. So really thank you for bringing it up.